Hello everybody. Welcome back to another episode of MTM. You're here with Mike and Trevor. We have a very special guest today, Dr. Ronald Dick. He is the Associate Sports Marketing Professor at Duquesne University. Dr. Dick, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Trevor and Mike. I was born in Philadelphia, but I grew up in a very rural area up above Scranton, and went to St. Joe's undergrad, St. Joe's master's, and then Temple for the doctorate. In 1982, I wrote a letter to the four major teams: the Phillies, the Flyers, the Sixers, and the Eagles. Got three thanks with no thanks except for the Sixers, and I worked with them from '82 to '96. The last 9 years as director of group sales. Of course, the 82-83 year was the year we won the championship with Moses and Julius Erving and Bobby Jones, Mo Cheeks, and all those guys. And, we never went back. So I was 21 years old and went down Broad Street and on the float. It was great. When I graduated in 84, they created a position, assistant director of group sales, and then eventually director of group sales. And the team was sold, and it was time to look for a new job. And I went to where a colleague of mine, John Nash, was the GM, and that was the New Jersey Nets. You know them as the Brooklyn Nets. And it was interesting what the Sixers did better than the Nets, and the Nets did better than the Sixers. But the people at Temple are like, hey, you've done all the coursework, the comprehensive exam. You need to write this dissertation. So I looked at other options, and one was moving to Wisconsin, a little Catholic school named Marion College in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. Now it's Marion University. And I coached tennis there, which is say I bought a racket. I coached basketball, women's basketball. And the second year I became the athletic director. And that was an interesting experience. It was a wonderful job. But I was there 21 months, and that felt like the longest 5 years of my life. So I really did enjoy the job. So I wanted to move to a larger city, and I moved to the University of Houston. We were in Conference USA, and I traveled with the football team and took care of all their ticket needs. So my title was Assistant AD for Ticket Operations and an Adjunct Professor. So I went from being in the frozen tundra to hotter than Haiti. And that was a cultural difference. My mom and dad lived in Reading, Pennsylvania. Dad was a retired superintendent, and he got ill. And when I got the doctorate done, that opened up doors that were not open, tenure track positions that were not open to me before. So I turned down a job at SUNY Cortland, and I went to New Haven, Connecticut. Some of you have heard of Yale. Well, that wasn't where I taught. I taught at the school with open admissions, and that was the University of New Haven. So I was there just as a college professor for 4 years, then also as an adjunct professor at Houston. So I appreciate them hiring me so that I could move back and forth from Branford, Connecticut, New Haven, Connecticut, which is a wonderful state, to Reading, PA, where my parents lived, and to help my mom and dad out in the final 2 years of his life. So I appreciate them hiring me, but I wanted to go to schools that were AACSB accredited, and I went to two: James Madison University in Harrisonburg, Virginia, fourth president of the United States, third Virginian out of 8 to be president, father of the Constitution, took copious notes under candlelight, shortest president, 5'3", married Dolly. She's known for ice cream and cupcakes. And the major of sport management was housed in kinesiology, which I can finally pronounce right. And that was more the movements of the body and, jumping jacks and things. And I interviewed a very good school, very good students in the beautiful Shenandoah Valley. And, we rejected 70% of the students that applied. So we had some pretty good students there. And I looked at San Jose State, flew out and interviewed there. I looked at Syracuse, interviewed there. And then I went to Duquesne University in St. Patrick's Day 2006. They were celebrating their Super Bowl win. And I interviewed at Duquesne. And that led to some really nice things. Got married for the first time in May 18th of 13. And got tenured in February of 2012. And then at 58 years old and one day, my daughter was born, February 3rd of 2020. So I dropped her off at daycare, and they said, it's really nice your grandfather dropped you off. And I said, well, actually, I'm a dad, but thank you for that accommodation. So that's me, Trevor.
It's a very nice and diverse resume you have there. You seem like you've been all over the United States.
I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere. Yeah. I'd like to think a lot of people wanted me, but maybe some didn't, once they got me. So who knows,
Well, you've been a lot of places, so maybe you're just dedicated enough to keep trying.
I always am optimistic. I think the next job is better than the job I have.
Tomorrow's gonna be better than today. That's the mindset.
And I think so, and sometimes that actually is true. So that was kind of my take on it. I'm trying to get the lighting right here for you guys. That might be better.
Oh,
Oh, you're
trust me, you look
fine.
fine.
Thank you.
So you have 15 years in the NBA as an executive, is that correct?
Yes.
Do you want to speak on that a little bit? Because everyone on the outside, I'm sure they see, oh my goodness, it's this glorious position. You're an NBA executive, you're with the team, you're a part of the organization. I'm sure it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Would you want to dive into that a bit?
Yeah, sure. And I think it might be a little bit of a misnomer to say 15 years as an executive. I mean, don't forget, now I was an intern the first couple of years. I was a sales rep in the ticket office at one point, then grow to assistant director of group sales and then director of group sales. And then with the Nets, I was the director of ticket sales. So there was very interesting comparing the two. Um, I with the Sixers, it was weird that I worked at the same place from age 20 to age 30, I think 34. And most people, and I, as you know, Trevor in class, I recommend you being open-minded to relocating. But the Harold Katz, our owner, he bought the team in July of 81 for 11 million, 1 million out of pocket. And he sold it for 145, 25 years ago. So 26 years ago. So,
Wow.
you could argue, well, that's a wonderful profit center. And I'm sure he can, eat steak and lobster every night for the rest of his life if he wants
Right.
to. But at the same time, what's it worth now? Like, it's
Probably billions.
145 million, probably 2 billion, which,
Right.
for those of us trying to do math here, 1,000 million is a billion. So he could have got 2,000 million today. But that's not only the good news. The good news is he could have made millions and millions of dollars every single year as the
Right.
thing just exploded. So it wasn't just, a selling price that was good. I asked him not to sell it. I said, look, you're just going to be another rich guy. And now you're a rich guy with a microphone in your mouth. So we had gotten worse 6 straight years. And, I can't thank Mr. Katz enough for paying for my master's and most of my doctorate. And I worked closely with his son. And, it was a great experience. But when new ownership comes in any industry, it might be time to go. Now, in my case, I was demoted, but I saw some very good colleagues of mine be fired. So, at the end of the day, almost anybody can be hired and almost definitely anybody can be fired. So, you have to be open-minded to relocating. You have to be nimble. You have to be open-minded to other ideas. But, going to the Nets in hindsight, there's an old saying, be cautious of the familiar face. And John was great, but John no longer was John Nash, a good friend. We just texted again today. He was on the sports side of the sports business. With the Sixers, he was on the sports side of the sports business and the business side of the sports business, and you could wear 2 hats back in those days. So he had nothing to do with the business side. Back then there weren't cell phones, there wasn't the internet. I should have. We were 3rd in the NBA in group sales with the Sixers. If I was open-minded to moving to the Nets, I should have been open-minded to looking at every NBA team and I would market myself totally different than what I did. At the end of the day, the Nets gave me a chance and I appreciate that. And, personal reasons start affecting you professionally too. Like I just started dating a young woman and I wanted to know where that relationship was going to go. So that made me want to stay closer to Philly. And that eventually, like many, imploded. So I really should not have taken that job, or I should have vetted them more. I thought coming in as director of ticket sales that would mean it implied that I had more staff under me, and at the end of the day, it was how many tickets did you sell, not your staff. I thought it was more of a management position, and I was concerned about leads too. Like, where am I going to get these leads? And they're like, oh, we'll provide leads for you. And I said, okay, that's great. And quite frankly, that didn't happen. But at the end of the day, I didn't. I have to sell. You have to sell more tickets. I mean, you have to reach certain goals. I never knew what those goals were. But when you're not doing well at a job, you'll know it way before the company will tell you. you'll know it in your heart and in your head. So in hindsight, if you ask me about that move, I wish I hadn't done it. I wish I had researched more and not try to just get out of the whole merger of the Sixers. People were gone. And now I remember they put me back in the Spectrum group sales department, and I was selling Barney. Barney's that kid's little, I don't even know if he's around anymore,
The
but
dinosaur.
the dinosaur, they said,
Purple
I didn't know
thing.
what Barney was. I didn't even know what Barney was. I said, look, I see myself as a business success. And they said, well, you have to work Friday night, 3 shows on Saturday, 3 shows on Sunday, 11, 3, and 7, and it's Barney. And I'm like, I'm an NBA executive, and the fact is, no, you're not anymore. You're not. So that's one of the reasons I went to the Nets. That made it easier to go to the Nets. So it was a learning experience.
Earlier, you mentioned that during your time in the Sixers, you guys had 6 straight seasons. You guys got worse.
Yeah, we
When
won the division with Barkley I worked with Charles Barkley from 1984 when we drafted a number 5 overall. And that was a very interesting draft. Could have been one of the greatest drafts of all time. First pick player selected was from the University of Houston, Akeem Olajuwon, the Dream Shake, the Silent H. Unbelievable player. One of the greatest players I've ever seen play. Number 2, they drafted for need instead of talent. And this guy actually had a very injury-filled year, but he ended up career, I should say, out of Kentucky, and his name was Sam Bowie, and he was from Lebanon, Pennsylvania, not too far from Reading. In that class of '79, I was the class of '80 in high school in Pennsylvania. Sam Bowie came out of Lebanon from East Brady High School. Jim Machine Gun Kelly, who went to the University of Miami because Papa Joe told him that he was going to be a linebacker at Penn State. I'm like, yeah. He's like, I'm not a linebacker. I'm a quarterback. Not at Penn State, you're not. So that Hall of Fame quarterback went to the University of Miami and then eventually played in the USFL with the Houston Gamblers. And then, of course, you all know him with the Buffalo Bills going to 4 straight Super Bowls. He was there. And right around the corner from where I live here in '79 was a guy named Dan Marino from Central Catholic. So there's athletes who graduated in Pennsylvania in '79 that were pretty darn good.
what
Marino,
happened to you? How come you're not on that list? Where's your Super Bowl?
yeah, we didn't have high school in football, thank God, because walking around concussed or with a bad ankle or knee or hip or never walked right.
Right.
So that was those guys. 3rd pick in the draft, Michael Jordan to Chicago Bulls. And believe it or not, people didn't think Jordan had much of a jump shot. He was just kind of an athlete. He could run and jump. That jump shot got a lot better as time went by, obviously. Number 4 was Sam Perkins, his teammate from the University of North Carolina. He went to Dallas. Number 5 was Charles Barkley to the Philadelphia 76ers. So we were thrilled to get him, and he's one of the greatest power forwards in the NBA history. So, and then Melvin Turpin, who also was at Kentucky with Sam Bowie, he went to Cleveland. Another funny thing is we had the 10th pick in the draft in '84. We took a guy who was on the Bobby Knight Olympic team in '84 with Jordan. Barkley got cut from that team. We selected Leon Wood, who became one of the best NBA officials in the history. 4 picks later at number 14, the Utah Jazz took this little white slow point guard out of Gonzaga named John Stockton, who when he retired was the all-time leader in steals and assists and a few other things. So imagine if we could have got Barkley at number 5 and then Stockton at number 10, how that could have changed the Sixers' future as
That might have changed the course of the league.
It could have. Yeah, he was pretty good, John Stockton.
Excuse
and
me.
he didn't take maintenance days off either. Him and Jordan played like 82 games a year. They played 4 games in 5 nights, like something you'd never hear today.
No load management back then. That's why.
No such thing. No such thing.
All right, moving on. So, so the Malice of the Palace is Detroit boys, Michigan, Southern Michigan men. We have our own conception of the Malice of the Palace. I want to hear your perspective as somebody from Pennsylvania, somebody outside of Michigan. What do you
Right.
think about the events? How did they change from what I remember, it was a very big black eye on the league. The league went from being an organization to more of like a thug league. They started their reputation started going down. How did that affect the NBA, and how did that affect Detroit sports, do you think?
Um, so it was kind of like, where were you when that happened? I was sitting in Memphis, Tennessee at the Peabody Hotel, probably one of their more popular hotels in Memphis. And I was at an SMA academic conference, Sport Marketing Association. And my colleague, Larry Dick, said, "Did you see what happened in Indiana? Or excuse me, in Detroit?" And I said, "No." We went down to the bar, the TV, and I looked at it. I said, "Oh my gosh, that is one of the worst things I've ever seen in my life." I said, there's going to be unbelievable fallout from this. I don't think we ever got to the point where we said, think the league will survive? Like, yeah, the league will survive.
Right.
David Stern he was beyond himself. He was so infuriated. So kind of, I thought that documentary that was produced by Jermaine O'Neal, who was a younger player, he's one of the guys that came right out of high school to the Portland Trailblazers. He didn't get play very much there, and they repackaged him, traded him to the Pacers, where he got a lot of opportunity to play, and he was a very good player, a bigger guy, about 7 foot, and he was growing into his body at the time. And you have to set the stage. There was Reggie Miller, who was the leader, was in street clothes. He was injured, and they had gone to the finals with I think in 2000 with Larry Bird as the coach, and Larry Bird was the GM of that team. I think Larry Brown, excuse me. Larry Brown was the coach of the Pistons, and I think Rick Carlisle was the coach of the Pacers. And I have to double check that. And the Pistons had won the championship the year before, and they had played in a playoff game. This was November 10th of 04, and the Pistons beat the Lakers in 04 in the finals, and that led to eventually the blowing up of the Lakers situation, where Karl Malone was on the team and Shaq would get traded shortly after that, and they just obviously couldn't coexist, Kobe and Shaq, it seemed like, unfortunately for them. And they were both very physical teams. The Pistons were very physical, and they were very good. That night, it was probably like the second or third week of the season, and they had some bad history together. And Wallace was not a guy to fool with. Now, he ends up being an undrafted player that made the Hall of Fame. And he was an undersized height-wise, but played with a real engine, and played really angry, and he played really hard.
My brother's actually named after him.
What? Wow.
Right.
And that's love. That's definitely love. So it was a blowout. For some odd reason, I thought that documentary I saw on was that a 30 for 30 on ESPN that Jermaine O'Neal tried to clean his name up a little bit from that, because yeah, sure, you can look at like them squaring up on the court and everything, but where was security? And supposedly the Pistons, the game was over, and Wallace, you just let them dunk. But this Tinsley, who was a guard for the Pacers, told Ron Artest, who from St. John's, who obviously has admitted he has some temper issues. He's now Meta War Peace, and he seems to have calmed down a lot. That, hey, you got a free shot here to really hammer somebody hard. So normally you just let the player dunk, you inbound the ball, and the game's over. Well, Wallace did not appreciate that cheap shot by Ron Artest. And that's where the altercation started from. So if Tinsley didn't tell him to do it, he probably wouldn't have done it, and they would have just won the game easily, the Pacers. So Artest, for some odd reason, lies down on the scores table, and some little nerdy guy throws a cup at him, and it hits him on the chest, and then he runs into the stands. There's no security, and he runs right by the guy who threw the cup, and he starts wailing on this innocent young guy. At that point, Steven Jackson jumps and goes into the crowd. And then you see the video, the rest of it's crazy. It's like people were done. It was over. Like the game was over. The place was emptying out. But like my question is, where were the cops? Where was security? They seemed very lax.
I,
And then
I I remember hearing that there was only 2 police on the court during the time of this game.
terrible. I mean, it's obviously the malice in the palace. That there was should have had more of a presence, and I'm sure they were reprimanded too for the lack of it. And then you hear Jermaine O'Neal say that one of those two cops, or maybe more, came into the locker room and said, we think we're going to arrest you. And he's like, "You're not going to arrest me. I'm getting on the bus and I'm going back to Indianapolis. You can talk to my lawyer in the morning." But to think that you were going to arrest the players of the Pacers for defending themselves just shows you how out of whack that whole thing was. If anybody's going to get arrested, the fans should have been arrested.
Right. Right.
And Wallace and anybody else. I mean, don't forget the other Philadelphia Wallace was there too, from Simon Gratz High School in North Carolina. Rasheed Wallace.
Right.
Rasheed ain't going to back away from anybody. So between Ben and Rasheed, and they're not brothers, but they were two great NBA front court players, and that's probably why they won the championship in 04. So, along with some other really good guys, it was very embarrassing. And corporate America kind of was like, what's going on? Now you can go back even 8 years before that. The guy that really changed the NBA as far as some of the perception, I think, was Allen Iverson. And I'd also acknowledge Latrell Sprewell. Those are the guys that went with the cornrows. They're the guys that went with the tattoos. They're the guys.
And sleeves.
Yeah, the sleeves. They're the guys that really. I mean, you can say what you want about Allen Iverson, but you got to say one thing about the guy. He is authentic. Maybe he was an overrated player. Like I read these articles now. You look at his shooting percentage. He really didn't shoot the ball that. But he played super hard. He was the smallest guy on the court every night, and he played with an edge. And he rightfully is in the Hall of Fame. But he was one of the first ones with Sprewell from Alabama that did that. This took it to a whole new level. The whole thing with entourages, and then these guys you're paying to get your laundry and stuff, like Barkley and Jordan and Olajuwon and Ewing and Stockton and Malone, like David Robb. None of those guys had the entourage, like all these hanger-oner guys that are on the payroll. Like nobody had that back before those guys got in. So, you just didn't do that. So that seems to be what happened. They did recover from it. They lost some of their corporate sponsorships, but eventually it turned out okay.
Do you think that's one of the reasons the Palace was demolished in 2020?
No, not at all.
I know the documentary tried to relate the closing of the Palace back to the malice, so I was just trying to get some insight.
I remember when they used to play where the Lions played, and that was in the Superdome. Christmas Day, 1984. I got on a plane, and we got fined heavily because you were supposed to fly in the night before. Well, we flew out at 7 a.m. and there was that happens a few times, as you guys know. There's snowstorms in Wisconsin and Michigan on a regular basis.
Right.
And we almost didn't make it to the arena. And I know one thing, I was young back then. I was like 22. And I'll tell you, if they had asked me to play a game, like your legs were rubbery, like you did not feel like yourself, because we flew out that morning from Philadelphia chartered to Detroit just so people could open up the gifts with their kids in the morning at like 5 a.m. And when the league found out that we had flown out the morning of the event, that game was on national TV, coast to coast. And that was played in the Superdome. The Silverdome where the Lions played. That was their arena. So then they got the building that we're talking about, the Malice in Auburn Hills in the suburbs of Detroit. And then now they have the new one. But no, these things are built for, it's really sad. The Kingdome in Seattle only lasted 19 years. The freshest one is the Atlanta Braves. They were at Turner Field, and then they didn't like that, so they built another one like 21 years ago. And then after 19 years, they knocked them down. Like in the United States, these are like just disposable.
Right.
arenas and stadiums. Whereas in Europe, they like the whole, like Wembley Stadium was around for like 100 years. Like they like to hold on to their stadiums and make them last a little longer. Here, it's like everybody wants to get rid of their stadium, which I think is,
When can we upgrade? How much can we upgrade?
yeah. The Pirates now, season ticket holders, every single person that buys a ticket, group sales, individual seasons, is going to pay an extra $1. And then, so let's say they sell 2 million tickets, or 1 million tickets. So they get $1 million the whole year. That's going to upgrade the PA system and the big scoreboard out in left field. Well, let me tell you, people aren't going to Pirates games because the PA system isn't good and the scoreboard isn't good. But, we got to, the reason they're not coming is because the team isn't winning.
Right.
And lose 100 games, you lose 100 games every year. Eventually, you have the lowest payroll. That's going to really make people not want to come out. So, everybody wants the new shiny toy, and they want the new building with club boxes and suites and all the stuff that comes with that.
So, moving on to our last topic. So, as a seasoned guy with lots of years in the NBA, I'm sure you have some stories with some players that you would like to share. If you wanted to, feel free to do that.
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to. And when you and I are in my office, and we'll pretend that's like the green room,
Perfect.
You asked me some things, and some of the, I mean, it's hard. You see Charles Barkley on TNT, and he is obviously beloved, right? I mean, and Shaq, the chemistry, they're both kind of clownish, funny, breaking everybody's chops.
Goofy personalities.
Goofy, but you you really want to watch that more than maybe you want to watch the game,
right?
And that's why they're making millions and millions of dollars. He makes a heck of a lot more money doing that than he did as a player. I remember when he signed for $3 million a year, and we thought that was all the money in the world. And I'm sure he's making a ton more than that right now. And that's a nice story about Jordan and his salary, but we'll get to that later. So Barkley, that guy, no, I don't have his cell number. No, we don't really stay in touch. But when I moved down to Houston, I got within earshot of him because he was still playing back in 99, 2000. And I just yelled at the Houston Cougar game I had to work. I said, "Hey, Barkley, you suck." And he turned around and he goes, "Ron Dick, I heard you live down here." He's got that. But I tell you, he's from Alabama, but man, when he got to Philadelphia, he was as edgy as anybody, breaking people's chops left and right, making fun of pranksters, stuff like that. When you had him, your other Detroit Piston guy, Rick Mahorn, and Manute Ball, God rest his soul, who passed away. You put those three guys in a room, you just got, they got nothing on the Kardashians. You put them and get a camera, that you'll just have laughs a mile a minute. Like that could be a comedy show.
Right.
So Charles, I think there's a lot of people out there that are frauds. They say they're a really nice guy, but really at the end of the day, they might not be. Charles wants you to think he's, a bad guy, or he's mean, or some of these people get upset about some of his views on animals and eating food and stuff like this, meat. But he's actually a very nice guy. So there's times I would ask him, "Charles, would you sign this autograph? Charles, would you?" Think back to it now, like you're really interfering with the product and his job. But I would, on a regular basis, if somebody sold like 1,000 tickets, I would get him to get out of the layup line, like before the game. And would you do a photo with? He never once told me no, not once. He always said, "Yes, I'd be happy to do it. I know you wouldn't bother me with this." And I get to meet somebody. It was exciting. They would say, and they all wanted Charles, right? They all wanted Charles to be. Hersey Hawkins was great, and Johnny Dawkins, and Mo Cheeks, and Bobby Jones, and all these, and Doc, of course. But man, Barkley was the one everybody seemed to love. He did that. Then the other one, my buddy Zach Hill, who just retired with the Philadelphia Flyers as the longest tenured PR director in the NHL, and the Flyers win the award for best PR team like all the time. He was our PR director with the Sixers, and Zach and I are about the same age. And Charles came to him once during Thanksgiving. This is when he was married with Maureen, and they had a baby girl. And he said, "Hey, I feel like I want to go down to Children's Hospital, CHOP, Children's Hospital Philadelphia. Do
Okay.
you think mind if I like walked around and signed autographs or something? Like, do they do that kind of thing?" And Zach looks at him. He says, "Do you have any of those black and white pictures of me and the black marker?" He's like, "Yeah, Charles, I've got like an endless supply of those." He said, "They would love to have you. I'll make one phone call their human resource, and you can go down there and sign your heart to light." Zach said, "Okay, but I have to say in the channels 3, 6, and 10, and 17 and 29. I have to send, the Philadelphia Inquirer and the Daily News." And Charles says, "No, no, 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 no. You do that, and I'm walking out." And and Zach says, "But Charles, that's my job. My job is to get positive press for our team." And
Did he
Zach,
did Chuck
he didn't want to be acknowledged for this charitable work. See, that's my point. Other people do charity work, and they
for the
want you.
fame and for the clout and
Yeah, oh, what a great
And
guy! You did this, this, and this. Hey, where are the cameras? Where's everybody smiling? Hey, how are you? Yeah, here I am. Here I am with the poor kid that's not healthy. But that's not what Charles did it for. He did it for from the bottom of his heart, and he didn't want anybody to know that he was doing it. Now, he did this a lot, by the way. So when that got over, he said to Zach, "Hey, what are you doing, Zach?" Zach's like, "My family's not in Philadelphia. I'm a single guy." He says, "Hey, you know where we could buy some turkey and stuffing and gravy and mashed potatoes and all that stuff?" He goes, "Yeah, they sell it down." He says, "Why don't you go home and be with your family?" He's like, "No, no, no, no. They're fine. I already checked with them. I want you to go and get that. Let's go. I'll buy it, and then let's take it down to the homeless shelter." And Zach says, "Are you serious?" He goes, "Yeah, I want to do this." And he says, "Okay, let's go."
what a
So,
guy.
whips out, hundreds of Benjamins, hundreds of dollars. He buys all this food. He goes down to the homeless shelter.
And
And
Chuck
he's,
is young at this point, isn't he?
oh, yeah, he's not even 30 years old yet. And he looked up, the guy looked up, he says, "Man, you look a lot like Charles Barkley." He says, "I am Charles Barkley." And they had a big laugh. So, he's got quite a big heart. And there's so many other things he does. Now, like Jordan, he does have a little bit of gambling issue, and he talks about that sometimes. But he really enjoys life. I mean, I think Shaq does too. But they're very supportive of Ernie when Ernie had problems, with the son issue. And, when you
Right.
really, Charles, you can count on Charles. And then the other issue we talked about, and I hope Coach Lynham, who I still stay in touch with, doesn't mind me telling the story. I don't think he does. But the difference between college and the NBA is college, well, it was a coach's league. The coach, Bobby Knight. I say university, Duke, Coach K, UCLA, Coach Wooden. I say Tennessee, you might think football, Peyton Manning. Like every school has a different thing they're kind of known for. Well, the days of the dictator in college are kind of here and gone with all the transfer portal stuff. But
Yeah.
back in the day, the coach, Bobby Knight, will be the coach like forever in Bloomington, Indiana. The players will come and go. Well, in the NBA, it's more of a players league. As you're finding out now, I mean, it's almost like I hope LeBron likes the coach, because
Right.
Coach Fogel, wow, what a great coach. In the bubble in 2020, we win the whole thing. All of a sudden, not even 2 years later, it's April of 2022. He can't coach anymore. It's like, wow. LeBron is thinking he might want to that guy's gone, right? I mean, we got to make a change. Now, I know they get paid very well, but it's a players league. Players are orchestrating the trades and everything. So, back then, and more so today, it's a players league. So Charles was the highest paid player on our team by far, $3 million a year. And we were in a game in the old Baltimore, when they were called the Bullets, not the Cap Center. We were over in Baltimore Arena. So 5 games a year they would play in Baltimore. The rest of the games, to cultivate that city's relationship, because they used to be the Baltimore Bullets. Then they were the Washington Bullets. So we played there. The 24-second clock never works. The 3-point lines aren't laid out right. I mean, there's always issues in that older building. So we were playing. We were good back then. The 1990. This had to be 1990 because Johnny Dawkins was our point guard. Hersey Hawkins was the 2 guard. Ron Anderson, Mike Jaminski, Rick Mahorn, those group of guys. So they were losing to a terrible Bullets team, now Wizards. And Michael Adams from Boston College is just going crazy, shooting all sorts of threes. So we're down, and I had bust down with the team in New York, Washington, New Jersey, anything we bust to, I would go and keep stats and then meet with some of the staff members in the press room of the other NBA teams to see what ideas they're using to create revenue. Okay. So you just have to know the game a little bit. And I would constantly give statistics to the play-by-play guy who was Mark Zumoff at the time, and then Steve Mix, wonderful guy from Toledo, Ohio. He was the color analyst. So I'm sitting right behind the Sixers bench. And we're down, like with 4 minutes to go, we're down like 11 points. Like, this is a really bad loss. We go on to win the division that year with 53 wins, but this could be a bad loss. So it's like with 4 minutes to go, you're down 11. It's like now or never. Like, if we don't come out of this timeout and go on a little bit of run, we're going to lose the game. There's no question. There's not enough time left. So Charles is looking forward, and Jimmy's squatting down, addressing the 5 starters and the guys that are not in the game right now around them, like you'd see in any high school, college, or pro game. And Charles just said, "Give me the ball, little man. Give me the ball. I want the ball. You want to win this game? We want the ball. You guys all stink. All of you." He points at his teammates. He says, "And that team over there, they stink too. Who's Michael Adams, right? What's he?" So if you scouted the Sixers and you saw the point guard come down and go 4 down, that means a double staggered screen for Hersey Hawkins or Ron Anderson are just going to keep running around in a figure 8 with the 2 post players. I guess at that time it would have been probably Mahorn or Jaminski. And eventually they're going to get loose and they're going to jack it up. But if you saw thumb, that's Charles's play. So Jimmy called 4 down, not Charles's play. And I sit there and I look at Jimmy and I'm thinking, man, I tell you what, that was I don't like the way he said that. That was a little disrespectful. Okay, whatever. I just kept my mouth shut because it wasn't my place to say anything, obviously, as the stat guy. So I watched Jimmy and I looked at him, and it's almost like the players, they had seen that show, that dog and pony show before. So that was nothing new to them. And I looked at Jimmy and he had called the 4 down. And I'm like, "Jimmy, please, just swallow your pride, eat this one, and just call thumb." Like, I'm just dying of curiosity. If he's going to run his mouth like that, call his play. So Jimmy, I literally, the last second, coming across the timeline, Johnny Dawkins looked at him and said, "Jimmy, what do you want to do?" And Jimmy said, "Run thumb." He ran thumb. I'm like, okay, here we go. Charles got the ball. He split the double team. They always doubled him because no one guy could guard him. And he tomahawk dunked it. He stole the inbounds play. I mean, who steals the inbounds play? And he makes a 3. They come down. We get a stop. He gets the rebound. He then drives to the basket. Like 4 guys converse on him. He passes it off to Jaminski and he dunks it. So he got an assist. He comes back down. I mean, he took over the game. It didn't matter what the other 9 knuckleheads on the court did. That guy's team is going to win. And we won by like 3, 4, 5 points going away. So they run into the locker room. They're real happy. We're getting back on the team bus. I'm like, that was unbelievable. I said to Zoom off and Mix, I said, "You guys see 82 games a year. I see around 50. I said, Steve, that was unbelievable." And Steve played in the league for like 9 years. And he goes, "Man, Charles really took over tonight." So we're having a couple beers on the bus ride home, and I'm watching everybody. It was a joyous ride. And, Jimmy, Charles comes in, the head coach sits at the front of the bus, just like high school. And Charles just acknowledged, "Hey, Jimmy, hey, Charles." To them, it's just another day, on the job, another day at the park, right? And Charles says, "Hey, you still live at St. Joe's? Yeah. I said, yeah, where they practice. And he says, can you give me a ride home? I'm staying in the apartment now. I got a different domicile. Please don't get me started on this. But yeah, I need a ride home. I'm like, I'd be happy to give you a ride home. So we get in the car and I said, Charles, are you and Jimmy okay? And he's like, oh yeah, yeah, he's one of the best coaches. And he has gone on record saying he's the best coach I've ever had. He has gone on record to say that. Like he got coached by Rudy Tomjanovich. Like he's had some pretty good coaches. Chuck Daly coached him in the Olympics in '92. So I said, I got to tell you, Charles, I've seen a lot of NBA games, but wow, man, you really took over that. And he's like, yeah, well, thanks, man. He says, tomorrow's another day and another game. Like it never ends. I said, during that timeout, don't you think you were a little rough on Jimmy? And he's like, yeah, I know. I know. I know I was pretty harsh, but if what you don't understand is if I don't throw a fit like that, they're going to run 4 down and not run my play. So I had to kind of like lose it there, yelling and call him little man and stuff. I mean, but he knows I love him. He knows I would never let the owner fire him. I would never let him fire him because we're not going to get anybody better than him. And if we don't win, it's not his fault. That's for sure. It could be the talent around me, but that's what happened. I said, I'm in. I'm good. I'm good. No problem with me. So then we ended up trading him 2 years later, and he was one of the Olympians. And a lot of people saying Barcelona, which was the greatest team ever, it was Stockton and Malone and a bunch of guys versus Pippen and Jordan and a bunch of guys. And, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird. That was Larry Bird's last hurrah. He retired that fall with the Celtics in '92. He was running on fumes. He had a really bad back. And he was the best player on that team, and that includes Jordan. And that next year, 92, 93, he was the MVP in the entire league. And then, of course, lost to Jordan in the finals in 93. So that's as close as he ever got to a championship.
The only thing missing from his resume is a championship. But really, who in the 90s was going to beat the Bulls?
If they had Stockton.
Yeah, Stockton and Malone lost back-to-back years. And I can still see Stockton looking at Malone like, come on, man, don't get small late in the game. You got to keep playing big. And they stripped him. Do you remember the time they stripped him and Pippen? And they got the ball back, and then Jordan hit the famous shot where he shoved Byron Russell away, allegedly shoved him out of the way, and then hit the jump. Yeah, I mean, that was a strong hand, but, I think Byron was going that way. Anyways, Jordan's competitiveness was unbelievable. I've seen him play live 60, 70 times, including playoffs. I've never seen anybody in any sport that competitive. I mean, he would rip his mother's heart out to win a regular season game. I mean, he really would. He was unbelievable. It was, the young guys like yourself, we talk about, LeBron. And LeBron, he's a Mack truck at 6'8". Jordan was 6'6". What is LeBron? 260, 250. I mean, he's a beast, and he probably was a better ball handler than Jordan. He probably was a better passer than Jordan. He's more like an Oscar Robertson, like, triple double machine. And, he's aged so well. He's had, his body is still in mint condition as he gets older now. But, he's not Jordan. He's not. He really isn't. But he's going to be the all-time leading scorer. Jordan actually went 3 years of college, right?
Right. And he took a hiatus from basketball for 3 years.
And he missed some of those years. Yeah, and there's a lot of rumors on why that happened. But Roy Williams, who was assistant coach for him and recruited him out of high school, said one time that, of course, Roy ends up being the head coach of North Carolina. But before that, when Dean Smith was still coaching North Carolina, he went to Kansas and won a championship there. Then he came back home to North Carolina to become the head coach. But they had recruited Jordan his rookie year, 81, 82, and they played pool, billiards. And, Roy unfortunately beat Jordan. And then Jordan wouldn't talk to him for like a month because he beat him. And
Such a
he was,
Jordan thing to do.
he was mad because he got beat. And, he knew how silly that was. But yeah, the guy is just unbelievably competitive, like more competitive than anybody that I've ever seen. His will to win was incredible.
Well, thank you very much for your time today, Dr. Dick. We appreciate you coming
It's my
on.
pleasure. Then the
Yes,
other thing
thank
about
you.
let me say one other thing about Jordan. In 1988, the Michael Jordan 88. So remember, the Sixers just sold for in 81. They just sold for $11 million, $1 million up front, finance 10. And Jordan signed a contract. Now, I hadn't won the championship yet because they had to get better players around him. He signed a contract for 8 years for $24 million. And I think the Bulls were probably appraised at around 75 million at that point, maybe 70. And people said, that's crazy. How could somebody make $3 million a year? I don't care who he is. Nobody's worth $3 million a year. And I'm like, that deal will be a horrible deal by 96. You know, he went from being the number one paid player in the league in 1988. And in 1996, he was the 122nd paid player in the league.
That's crazy.
$3 million a year. Not one. Jerry Reindorf, who still owns the Bulls, said, and he also owns the White Sox. So that's why he played baseball for the White Sox in Birmingham, Alabama. That was his minor league team. He said, Michael, I'm going to give you this money, but don't you ever come back to me with your hat in your hand and wanting to renegotiate. And to Jordan's credit, Karl Malone went back like 5 times with the Jazz to refinance and renegotiate. Jordan never came back. And I give Reindorf credit. He paid Jordan when he didn't have to. When he left the game to go try baseball, he still paid Michael the $3 million. And then when he came back in 96, he made
I did not know that.
He got paid $36 million per year each year when he came back in 96.
So his contract when he came back was bigger than his entire contract in the 8 years he made.
That's right. Because the NBA at that point has exploded. All the international money was coming in. The 2 expansion teams were coming in. The Vancouver Grizzlies, which you know as the Memphis Grizzlies. There aren't a lot of Grizzlies in Memphis. There aren't, but there are in Vancouver. And the Toronto Raptors. They each paid $125 million to get in the league.
Wow.
6 and 7 years earlier, the Orlando Magic, the Miami Heat, the Minnesota Timberwolves, and the Charlotte Hornets came in. They each paid $32.5 million to get into the league. 32.5. I remember saying, man, that's a bargain. That team's going to be worth a lot more than 32.5 million.
For sure.
Yeah.
And Jordan got 24 million to play for 8 years. And then he got 36 million. Then the league immediately turned to Shaq, who most people thought were the most dominant player in the league, and said, we're paying Mike for what he did in the past. Shaq, you're not 36 million. You're going to be second for 20 million with Jerry Buss. And they said, that's fine. He says, I understand. You got to pay Mike for what he did. Those guys never played in front of anything but a sold out crowd, Jordan and Pippen. It was like it was even better than when the Pens were good with Malkin and Fleury and Crosby. Like every place they go, they sell out pretty much in the NHL. It was like the Beatles were coming into town when Jordan and Pippen came in. Like it's like everybody wanted to go to the game, even the casual users.
Do you think that
Go ahead.
But one follow-up question. Do you think that Jordan inspired fans from other cities to join the basketball fan base?
I think he was such a phenomenon that you would not have to even sell his game as an individual ticket. You would make people buy it in a 5-game plan. And you would stick some hamburger in there, like put the Clippers in there, put the Sacramento Kings in there, put the Minnesota Timber Dogs, like throw some hamburger in there. And then, hey, I get the two Jordan games. Like that's how hot he was.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah. That's
crazy.
Was.
The Timber Dogs. I can't get over that. Well, thank you, Dr. Dick, for your time today. We appreciate you coming on. We'd love to have you on again sometime in the future if you would be open to that. So
That would be my pleasure. It's always good to, get to see the questions before we go on so I can get my thoughts together. But yeah, as you know in class, Trevor, this is a stream of consciousness. So I don't even know where it's going sometimes, but it's a really fun topic and you guys are doing a nice job here narrating it. And I hope everybody's doing well out there in podcast land and hopefully your ratings are going up. We're going up, up, up.
up, up, up. Thank you very much, Dr. Dick.
Long time
Thank
listener,
you.
first time caller. Happy to have you aboard, Trevor. Thanks for your time.
MTM fans. Peace.